Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and today is episode 65, Dimostrazione. And you're going to wonder why I'm speaking in Italian. Well, I just recorded who knows how long of an episode, just a few minutes where I was talking, and at some point I did not notice that it stopped recording, and the podcast recorder told me that the SD card is full, but it also will tell me that there's 24 hours of audio recording available as I'm looking at it right now. So don't know what happened, but we're going to hop right back into Dimostrazione. That is chapter 2 of a 7-part series about Leonardo da Vinci and what made him a genius. So what I just got done explaining in the previous kind of 5-minute segment that I recorded, these chapters, these 7 characteristics of him, Leonardo da Vinci, are really intertwined. So to sum up what I had said, last week was curiosity, cultivating curiosity, kind of how I think about it in terms of looking at past, present, and future, like looking at a timeline and saying, like, in the past, what did I need? What could have made my life better? What knowledge did I need to know? To then look at the present and say, like, where am I going? What do I need to go where I'm trying to go? And looking at the future and, like, what do I think the future looks like? And trying to kind of create something out of nothing. And just being always curious about what those things could have been, could be, will look like, and seeking information on those topics, kind of letting intuition guide me a little bit. So that leads into this demonstration, or what they would call testing knowledge through experience. And I did a quick call out to chapter 5, which we'll get to in a couple episodes. But it's basically about balancing art and science. I've talked before on the podcast about the scientific method, and it's a great way to test facts about our universe. And, you know, testing knowledge through experience literally is the scientific method for science and scientific things. Measurable, repeatable, specific, you know, we talk about SMART goals or whatever it may be. Things that we can see, touch, feel, hear, and experience in our physical world, which is excellent. And I think what has plagued me before in my life is paralysis by analysis. So we have so much information now from science about the nature of our reality. I think it's easy to be complacent and look at that as, good enough. We know what's going on. And I think if you really just feel kind of the anxiety of life, and I think the way people are feeling these days, especially myself, you just kind of know, like, of all the stuff we know, it's great, but there's also got to be just an enormous amount beyond what we know that we don't know, or we can't even begin to measure yet. So to me, that has been so paralyzingly large that it kind of stopped me from dimostrazione, like basically fucking around and finding out. That paralysis by analysis, information overload can freeze you in place and keep you from acting. So I think there are things I've done where I've just acted on it and I've been comfortable, but I've acted on what I've been comfortable with. And what I love about myself, the last like 5 or 6 years, I've started to get really uncomfortable. Things, ideas that I want to look into that are really outside of my previous scope of things that I was doing. It's funny, like COVID almost made it so that you couldn't do a lot of those things. So then when it came to, leaving the house after COVID, or for me, I left Indiana and moved to Texas. It started to become really apparent to me, like, hey, there's so much time that I lost, kind of paralysis by analysis, that like I never like lived life. I never started living. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily out of fear, but more so just like I want to make the most of the time I have left. I really appreciate and I'm grateful for my experiences of my past. So I want to keep it going. I want to like make the most of right now and be ready, prepare myself to do that in the future. So that shift came for me at a time when I think it comes for a lot of people, and it's been great. I'm so happy to have taken that step. But now, reading this book, I try to watch out for confirmation bias, but a lot of the 7 items that Leonardo da Vinci, they say that were part of his genius, are things that I try to incorporate in my life. So I'm not perfect at executing all of them, but I at least think about them. And I'm not saying that makes me a genius, but I'm saying there's definitely a spark of genius in the way that I witness myself thinking sometimes. And so this episode's all about like talking about those things and like what I'm doing to expand that for myself so that maybe someone else could be inspired and, get out there and start testing as well. But I've done a lot of talking about science, and the thing that I was also missing, in addition to just acting, execution, is the art side. And that's kind of where this podcast came from. Even if I get on here and say words and nobody listens and there's no ad revenue and it's not popular, at the very least, it's like a weird journal entry. And someday, maybe my kids will listen to it, or anyone, and just realize like what I was going through in this period of time, and then like maybe knowing what I'm doing at age 50, just kind of saying like, hey, that's like a little psychological roadmap. Like that guy was struggling and figuring it out and demonstrating. So in a way, like I do know too, there's some people, like I mentioned last episode, that have used it, kind of saying that I'm a douchebag for having a podcast, and like it's fine. Like I'm not like worried about that because I know what I'm using it for. But I also know there's an equal amount of people that appreciate some of the things that I say. People that get to know me better through this and then talk to me in real life about it, and we have great conversations. And just a few, like 2 or 3. But it is comforting to know that there is at least a little bit of good that comes of it right now, and I think the good will someday, shine through. I think it'll be good in ways I don't even quite see yet. So that's testing knowledge through experience. I'm just putting this out there. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen, but we're going to figure it out. So this way through the art, it's something that I want to do. I want to write books. Chiropractic is really interesting because it's really an art and a science. Like there's a bit of a feel to it when you're touching another human being, especially in the neck region. It's something like pretty intimate about it. And you can really, really help someone or also really, really hurt someone depending on how you're showing up to that interaction. So if you're doing it as an art form and trying to replace bone that has been, dislodged in some way, as the chiropractors would say, subluxated. So like a luxation is a dislocated bone. A subluxation is like slightly dislocated bone. So putting that bone back where it's supposed to be in kind of the artwork of somebody's body. The human body really is a work of art as well. So when you restore that function and that structure, it can be an art form. There's an art form to it, and everyone's body is just a little bit different. It's built a little differently. People have variances and all kinds of things. So being able to just be with the person and know the science of it and know why we put the bone back so the nerve doesn't get pinched, so the body can function properly, the signals can get to the body. But also just the art of it of like, hey, this is like a beautiful human life. Let's restore it. Let's give it a little bit more oomph. So that's why I think I love chiropractic so much. And this chapter really kind of shines through there. And as someone who, again, has really kind of hidden at times in life, I mean, I think life goes through waves where you need to rest and recuperate, and then times where you kind of put yourself out there and, you know, maybe get a little hurt or maybe make some progress or anywhere in between. And it's all a part of that process of you becoming who you are. But I will say now, I think I'm putting myself out there way more than I ever have. And it honestly has paid dividends. Like I see the results of sharing my kind of loving admiration with the world and like trying to just be the best version of myself, like put my best version of myself out there. And it affects people in ways you don't know. I know there's people that have told me that I've affected them in some way, and there's probably equally, you know, a bunch of people that never told me, but, you know, it happened, and that's great. I love that. So being willing to put yourself out there and test your knowledge, you know, you may not be ready, and it's never, ever, one thing I've learned is it's never, ever going to be perfect, but it is worth it. Even if maybe you get an answer that you didn't like, you get an answer you didn't expect. You know, sometimes surprise is good in one case if it's something you didn't expect that you like. If it's something you didn't expect that you hate, you know, that sucks. You gotta like metabolize that as you can. and just being willing to always show up one more time. I think half of life is just being willing to, like, people say you get knocked down, you get up. Sometimes you don't even get knocked down. You just don't want to go back out there. You're just like, hey, I'm like good. But in my opinion, the reason the human race is where they are is because people that struggle but really mean well get kind of hurt or nipped, and then they get sent back to the cooler, and they don't put themselves out there when people maybe who don't have as good of intentions right now need the people with good intentions to kind of counterbalance the issues. And people with not so good intentions, oftentimes, I always like to bring up Hanlon's razor. It's like a philosophical thing. Razors are like just a phrase that kind of cuts through the bullshit of a situation. So Hanlon's razor is like, you know, don't attribute to malice what can be attributed by stupidity or ignorance or, you know, insert word here. There's a lot of different words that go there, but you're not necessarily calling anyone stupid. Just people don't know what they don't know. And if they're not testing their knowledge to experience and learning and adapting quickly, then they can get stuck doing the same kind of poor choices over and over. So good people with good intentions need to get out there and just give that feedback. I mean, we're all feedback loops for each other. And I think one thing I've gotten better at is testing my knowledge through experience, but then also through the lens of like, all right, who is this person to me? How much power do they have over me currently? Like, what's their incentive to do a good job? Give me like really good feedback, like the best feedback possible. And then not only that, but then trying to honestly look at the feedback. You know, I mentioned recently that I took two practicals at school that come to my mind recently. So one, it was a professor who was a little bit younger, may even be younger than me, and I'm 34. but this person is a chiropractor and coming back to teach students. But chiropractors that come back young to teach, I get a little wary because some of them practice outside of school and are still doing everything. But there's all kinds of reasons someone could go back and teach. I think I've seen some professors who maybe the real world got them a little bit, and teaching gives them like a stable salary and just like a job that's finite at the end of the day. Like you teach the students X, Y, and Z and you're good to go. It's kind of a place for people to rest and recuperate and recover again, which is very necessary in life. But I had a professor like that who really kind of in real time kind of eviscerated me with feedback. And what I'll say is, in the real time, I just noticed he didn't really give me the time to correct myself or to kind of like finish what I was doing. So I would say what I was doing was about 40% wrong. And he just stopped me about halfway through before I could really get the whole enchilada in there, and was giving me feedback on things I hadn't even done yet. So as it was going on, I noticed myself feeling, a little bit dismissive. But then in the moment I was kind, and I said like, hey, like, thanks for the feedback. I'll get that stuff right, on the next opportunity. And I don't know I'll actually get an opportunity to do that exact exam again, but it was memorable enough that I know I'm going to know the stuff better and everything. And then, so about 4 days later, I get the grade, and it's 85%. It's a B, like a kind of a high B. And I was a little confused because it felt to me like a C interaction. So once again, kind of judging the way he came at me, but then he came with an 85 grade, which I felt like was decently reflective of the knowledge I had in that moment. And like I made mistakes, so some points off is fair, but it was totally fair. And the second scenario was actually today. Totally different type of professor, older professor, has been around the block, is teaching because I think there's a lot of reasons, but person probably made to teach, for sure. And in this scenario, I knew I was missing some pieces to my practical, but they were like verbal kind of minor pieces. The actual demonstration of what I was doing to the patient was safe and like professional, and there was no, kind of problems outside of that. And I think in a clinical setting, it would have worked, the way that I did it. And there was just a couple of things they were looking for to understand if I know what I'm talking about, kind of thing. So I was demonstrating it properly and just not able to verbalize it or kind of skipped a step or two. And when I got the feedback, I actually didn't, it ended up being, barely like a C grade for that. So in this case, like I definitely kind of screwed the pooch, but the grade was lower than I thought it would be ultimately. And it's a little bit to do with what the rubric is and the things that I missed. They just weighted them higher. So grade was lower than I thought. And it honestly, at the end of all of it, it all made sense. And there was one thing he made an amendment on, gave me some points back. So at the end of the interaction, I thought it was fair. But in the middle of it, I was thinking to myself, like, hey, something's a little off here. So in both scenarios, something was off. But the end result was ultimately fair. So it's when you're looking to test knowledge through experience, I think those are also both science-based things, but there is an art to teaching. There's an art to doing some of the chiropractic stuff we do. So in a way, school is a great way to kind of talk about this subject. But there's all kinds of ways we do it. One way I've been doing it recently is, romantic relationships. Any that have come up, any connections that have come up, I've I've over the years I've realized how much I was just doing by default and going off of feelings and maybe chemistry. And chemistry is really hard to discern from like genuine love at first. So you kind of have to, spend some time to allow those feelings to kind of sift. But what I've learned recently is there are certain things that are just immediate disqualifiers of like, this person doesn't have the right intentions and there's no way to kind of recover from, this specific action happening, in terms of what I want in the future and the way that I want to treat my partner and be treated. There's just certain standards that you have to hold to, and they're kind of ultimately non-negotiable. And I do believe in forgiveness and repair and like giving the person an opportunity to kind of come back from it. And if they do it swiftly and they seem genuine and sincere, like, all right, cool, like no problem, we'll keep it moving and keep kind of doing this thing. But the more experience you get, the more vulnerable you can be to maybe getting a result you don't want on a test, or like dealing with people, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever it is. That's just information that's going to help you have a better quality life, better quality interactions, better quality outcomes for your goals. And that's really the main value of demonstration, and not only that, but curiosity. So being curious in the first place to then go and test these things, and then balancing kind of thought and feeling, art and science, and being able to, find meaning in life. Sometimes if you go all facts, it's not going to feel right. You're going to feel like, hey, what's the point? And if you go too art and abstract, then there's no anchor to reality. So a good balance of both helps you stay grounded, but also think of all the possibilities and test to see if those possibilities are even real. Because then the more information you collect through experience, the more likely that you're going to be able to, get what you want. And what you want is going to change. It's going to adapt to your reality. So, and I'll finish with this. I've always been big on natural selection, and really it's just the organism being able to adapt to its environment. So our information environment nowadays is moving at a rate that's never been seen before in history. So people are what I would consider maladapting, but there are people where I see positive adaptations, or what I believe to be positive. So now I look at negative adaptations and I can kind of test to see like, okay, yeah, that's definitely not helpful. And then you can take the positive ones that I think are good, and you can test those too and try to make it fail. Because you never can really prove anything right with the scientific method, but you can definitely prove things wrong and rule stuff out. And the stuff that you rule out, you can kind of set to the side. And anything that you can believe with maybe a limited data set or just a feeling, an intuition, a hunch, is something that you should go after and try to disprove, because how else are we going to know? Like, it's kind of on you. And I know I said I finished with that, but it brings up, I finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the extended versions, last night. I'd watched like kind of half and half Return of the King. But at the end, Frodo has the ring, and the big theme is just like, we're all here to do what we're here to do. Like, Aragorn's there to be the King of Gondor. And some people in the Fellowship of the Ring are kind of supporting casting characters, but are like super special in their own way. And like, Frodo's supposed to bear the ring and throw it into Mordor, but then, Smeagol ends up tackling him and falling in with the ring instead, so Frodo doesn't necessarily have to die. And Yeah, it's just about like accepting your role, and like your role is like pretty flexible for a long time in life, but then there's certain choices where you can like disprove that something is true, and you can close doors as you go. And as you get to the end of your life, I think everyone wants to keep as many doors open as possible, but there's an opportunity cost to everything. So I think I personally am happy because my highest purpose, that door never shut in my face, at least not yet. And it still might. Who knows? There's so many things can happen that could keep me from practicing as a chiropractor, or for as long as I think I will. And I'll be ready to deal with that if that possibility comes up. But even just knowing that I'm curious about what that would look like, and I'm willing to test, myself right now, and being like, hey, if I do a little thought experiment, if I couldn't be a chiropractor, what would I do? Like, I'll be honest, like, I don't have a ready answer, but I'll keep thinking about it, and I will. So with that, I'm going to finish out the episode for today. But real quick, ask yourself, is there some knowledge you're hanging on to, something that you want to do, some action you want to take, but, you just haven't done it yet. You've been putting it off. I think you gotta, at some point in life, shoot your shot and get after it to know the truth one way or the other. And in, a lot of ways you'll never know until you really cross that threshold and collect the data and see and feel and hear, what it's like emotionally, even, from the art standpoint. That's really important. And something I value recently too is just understanding, how does it feel? Does it feel right? Cross that threshold. If it doesn't feel right, no problem. Most things are reversible. So you can come back from that. If it's a podcast, you can stop doing it for a quarter and then come back because you realize you missed it. And yeah, just change variables and see what happens. Fuck around and find out. Until next time, I hope you choose to do something productive in that way. And I will catch you next week. See y'all later.